Well, here I am talking about virtual and hybrid communication. And I have been teaching these programs now for the last 2 years. And I always ask people, what are the challenges about virtual and hybrid communication? And one of the things comes up is technology. So, with full transparency, yesterday I was about to give a session and my entire computer, the chip that allows you to access the internet, for some reason was faulty and my computer crashed. I had about 15 minutes to go before the session and I managed to switch computers. And it's that moment of panic of the technology is not going to work. I have this whole group of people waiting for me, and there's an issue that I am having difficulty troubleshooting. Now, I managed to use a computer that didn't have my usual virtual backgrounds. I have a lot of slides that I use in virtual backgrounds, and none of that was working. I somehow managed to get the group be fully transparent and tell them what was going on, and we had a wonderful interactive session. So, first tip of the day is with virtual and hybrid communication, which is here to stay, whether you are back in the office, a certain amount of all our communication is going to be virtual and hybrid. So, tip number one, things do go wrong with technology. I have been doing this for 2 years. I've never had that issue. And the ability to quickly troubleshoot, switch computers, then let people know what was going on in a way that was confident, comfortable, fully transparent, but didn't hijack the event. Now, I am in a different location today because for those of you who are very technical, for some reason, my internet is working in one location of my house, but not where my studio and my lights and my green screen are. So I had scheduled this for today, and it may not look like it normally does, but here I am. So should technology be an issue, please be transparent. And the other thing that we discussed with this wonderful group of people was if you have to go off camera for a moment, or if you are having technical difficulties and can't join on camera, let people know in the chat. If everyone else is on camera and you are not, just put into the chat, hi, having some difficulties, or stepping away for a moment so that you let people know. So we spoke about just clarity, clarity, clarity. And one of the takeaways that people got from the session, and I'll share it with you because it was one of the main takeaways, was in the absence of proper information, people come to their own conclusions. And somebody paraphrased it very well. In the absence of proper communication, people come to their own conclusions. So don't assume anything and err on the side of over communicating. So technical issues came up as number one. Number two was, how do you read people's body language? If you're in a virtual situation, or as I've done so many times, I'm virtual, but people may be in person, or they may be virtual and I'm in person. And it takes paying extra attention. You can also check in with people. If you notice something about somebody, I wouldn't call them out in the meeting, but I might say, Max, I noticed on yesterday's call that you were looking distressed. Is there something going on? And Max might say yes or no, I didn't realize I was doing that. So check in with people. Body language requires that you observe, which means when you're observing, you can't be looking into the camera. So look at the difference between me going like this. There, I'm now looking at people on my call versus I'm now looking at you into the camera. So one of the techniques that I've been speaking about since March of 2020 is you looking into the camera when you are talking to somebody. But that means that you might have to look down at your screen to observe their body language and then come back and answer to them. So it's a technique, please, important to acquire. So how do I observe body language? Then the other thing that came up, and this is something important, is we are not comfortable with silence. But when you ask a question in a virtual scenario, you want to pause. You want to wait for that person to unmute. But tell the group that you're speaking to or a meeting you're facilitating, these are the rules of engagement. I want you to be as participative possible. So if I ask you a question, I will wait for a moment. If someone is not on camera, then you might call their name and say, Millie, would you like to answer this? Give it a couple of moments. Now, they may not be on camera because something's really going on, or they may not be on camera because they're not there. They've just dialed it in and put their name up and left. You don't want that to be a moment that you embarrass them, but you might say afterwards, I did call on you. So what we're learning is that all of this requires new navigation. The other thing that came up is, how do you, after you've had an interactive, let's say virtual call, get to know the people in your group beyond the call? And again, this is something I've been speaking about and speaking about and speaking about. And that is, set up some time and say to a coworker, a colleague, a manager, you know, you and I have seen each other on several virtual calls. Do you have 10 minutes to really connect? So please, in that interaction, ask specific questions. And the structure I've spoken about many, many times is that everyone has a past, a present, and a future. You can always ask specific questions about a past, specific questions about present, and specific questions about future. But the whole idea is, if your phone rings during a session, just turn it off, but don't answer the call. So it's little things about being conscious and being deliberate. And we need to raise the bar now. We've all been doing this since March of 2020. It is now April of 2022. It is not enough just to dial it in and hope that organic connections happen. It does take work. It does take you being deliberate. It does take you being conscious. And it does take you being able to effortlessly things going wrong. And if you've just joined us, I am having to be in a whole of my house because for some reason on this computer, it's the only place I can get the internet. And I will be running off straight after this to the Geek Squad at Best Buy or buying a new computer. But I had an experience yesterday that really just was so indicative of what is going on in our virtual worlds. And that was, I'm about to give this presentation, I'm all set, and suddenly I lose connectivity. And I switched very quickly to computers. The audience was wonderful, and I explained to them, but instead of having my wonderful virtual backgrounds where I could change slides and easy access, I didn't have that. But after years of being live on television and working for live television, I stayed calm. And that's one thing I'm asking you to do, is just that ability to really stay calm. And so I thought it would be a good day to show you a video around staying calm, because if things happen, the one thing we want to do is be able to breathe and stay calm. So that's my tip of the day. And I will share my tips on combating nerves with Nadia, particularly if things go wrong technically.
Hello, I'm Nadia, a professional speaker and broadcaster. And I speak around the world and I get asked lots of questions. I get asked, who's the best person you've ever interviewed? What was it like to meet Nelson Mandela? And is George Clooney really so sexy? But the question I get asked most, and this is from Dubai to Durban, is before you give a presentation or before you stand up in front of a group of people, do you get nervous? So I'm going to share a couple of tips, a couple of great antidotes to dealing with your nerves. The first and most powerful antidote to nervousness is mental. What is your mind focusing on when you feel nervous? And at this point, I ask you to start developing something called your positive emotional memory database. And what is that? That's a series of positive past experiences that validate you. So think for a moment of anything in the last couple of years, be it a job, promotion, or getting a job, or even watching your child being born. Something that when you recall makes you smile, makes you feel successful, confident, and powerful. And as you get nervous and as you're faced with an intimidating scenario, simply play that video in your mind, and it's amazing how your body will respond. The second thing that I always do is I go to the far end of wherever I'm speaking or to the back end of the CNN newsroom, and I do something rather unusual. I take a deep breath in and I go 1, 2, 3, huh! Let me show you that again. 1, 2, 3, huh! Now, that's one of those things that you really have to do backstage and not in front of your audience. One of the tendencies when people get nervous is that their voice often gets high-pitched and breathy. So, one of the most powerful things you can do so that you don't sound nervous is a series of voice exercises. Very simply, taking the vowel sounds A, E, I, O, and U. Start with hum, mum, mum, hum, mum, mum, hum, mum, mum, hum, mum, mum. Then with the vowel sound E, him, 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 with the vowel sound I, him, 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 with the vowel sound O, hum, mum, hum, mum, hum, mum, with the vowel sound U, hum, mum, hum, mum, hum, mum. I hope you notice the sound is now in front of my mouth, and it's very resonant and round, and it sounds deep, and I sound relaxed. One of the best antidote to nerves is the 3 Ps of practice, practice, practice. Know who you're speaking to, what you want them to think, feel, and do as a result of this communication. And I like to ask a question when I start a presentation. That way, the focus goes from me and the attention goes from me to the audience. So practice asking a question. I've shared a couple of tips with you, and very briefly, if you want more detail on any of these, please take a look at my book, Small Changes, Big Impact, which is maximizing your presence and leveraging the power of your person.
So what is virtual presence, and how can you maximize and elevate yours? Well, your virtual presence is how you engage, collaborate, lead, inspire others, motivate others in your virtual world. And there are a couple of things that each and every one of us can be doing as our virtual worlds and our hybrid worlds continue to expand. So if we're looking at being on camera, please remember that you want the camera of your computer screen to be eye level with you. So while now I'm looking into the video camera, if I'm on a Zoom call or a WebEx call or a Microsoft Teams call or whatever platform you use, I want to be looking into my computer camera. That's synonymous with looking at you. You want as much light in front of you as possible because we want to see you. We don't want you to look like a cardboard cutout or like you're in the witness protection program. And then think about your background. Now, I have a unique background today because I'm actually in Johannesburg, South Africa, visiting my mother. And so I've chosen this beautiful garden background. But if you use a virtual background, make sure it's not too distracting. And then be intentional about really connecting with people virtually. So for my seminars, workshops, keynotes on how to elevate your virtual presence, please go onto my website, nadiaspeaks.com.